The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening. Welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. Now, I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you within a cannon shot of historic Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us. Now, Arcane Radio and Beyond Explanation channels is made possible by you liking, subscribing, and sharing our programming. Super chat donations are essential for us to continue offering you our unique content. Your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. So tonight, I welcome Phantoms and Monsters Fortean Research team investigators Butch Witkowski and Vincent Richardson to Arcane Radio. Now, Butch is the founder of UFO Research Center, Pennsylvania. He's an independent researcher, investigator of ufology, abductions, paranormal, and cryptozoology. The purpose of the UFO Research Center, as well as Phantoms and Monsters Fortean Research, is to conduct responsible investigations using factual and unbiased evidence-gathering techniques in order to evaluate and investigate the unexplained throughout Pennsylvania and North America. And joining him is Vincent Richardson, and I'll let Vincent tell you a bit about himself. So Butch and Vincent, thanks for joining me this evening.
Hey, everybody.
So Vince, tell everybody who you are and why you're on and the whole deal.
Well, I'm your Beyond Explanation community manager, and everybody knows me from the chat rooms. I'm subbing in for Amy Bue. I know I'm not as pretty as Amy is or as talented in the Bigfoot field, but here I am. I've been part of the paranormal field since 2009 in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, you're kind of filling in tonight for Amy, and that's fine. You're my you're kind of filling in also as my research assistant for my next book. So of course, you're working here at Beyond Explanation as well. So good to have you on.
Oh, thanks a lot.
So, hey, Butch, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Man, I'm hanging in there. Same old, same old. You know it is with me.
Pretty much everybody right now.
Yeah. So, so tonight we talk about a few new things that kind of come our way. But one thing I did want to talk about was this short video from Cass River, Michigan. Now I took a few screenshots off the video itself, and Bill will put them up there for folks to see. But I tell you, this is an interesting sighting. Now, of course, you're going to get a lot of naysayers and say it's a guy in a suit or something else, which is standard fare. But, that picture right there kind of looks like it's got holding something in its left arm. May very well be a juvenile. It's very strange. It's somewhat pixelated, but it's interesting. When I first looked at it, I thought it may have been carrying a deer on its left side. Now, when you look at these other photos, it does look like something may be draped on the left side. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I thought it might be a female Bigfoot. It's kind of hard to tell the size of what this thing is. I'd venture to say it's at least 6.5 or 7 foot, just from what I can see. What are your thoughts on it, Butch?
Could Bill flip to the next couple pictures, and I'll tell him when to stop at one, the one that got me. That one right there.
Yeah.
Looks like a deer head with antlers.
Yeah, it does. Either a
does.
deer head with the long ears draping down off of maybe a doe or maybe a fawn, probably a doe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I talked to a woman today who saw it on the blog, and now they don't say what part of the Cass River this was, but she said that it looks like an area that's about 20 miles from her. And she said that she has seen Bigfoot wading that river and in other parts along the river for years. She said she's lived there since the 60s. So I don't know. She says she's not surprised by it. She said the color and everything is very similar to what she has seen in the past.
That shot right there is also good.
Yeah. That's a really interesting shot.
Yeah, because you can see the color of whatever he's carrying is kind of a fawn color as opposed to his reddish color, and there's looks like some white there, like maybe the tail end of the deer. So I'm going to say it's carrying a deer, but the body shape, form, I mean, it really looks like what it is.
Yeah, the side view really has a conical shape to the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you say it's the real deal, you'll get 100 people to say, like, what are you drinking?
Sure.
But it's been one that, out of all the ones that have been put up lately, this one's really good. I mean, I think it's really good.
Well, if you look at the video, and I've got the link to the video in the piece I posted, it's only about a 4 or 5 second video.
Yeah.
And they happened to grab this thing as it was, because they were in a kayak, and they saw it downriver from them, and I don't know, they got what they could, but when you do see it moving through the water, it doesn't look human to me the way it moved around.
No.
If that was somebody in a suit, first of all, they'd be waterlogged from the waist down.
Yeah.
And I don't see it that they can move that well. So I don't know. It is what it is. It is interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And of course, we've had some video and some screenshots over the years, but this is one of the better ones, I'd say. So that, plus we also had an interesting talk with a gentleman from Greene County, Pennsylvania, by the name of James West. Now, he's going to actually be coming on the show at some point in September, but he has been on a few shows over the past year or so, and I really wanted to talk to him in depth. In fact, I think we talked for about 90 minutes, and he was telling me about 2 horrendous cryptid canine encounters he had near his home, which is in the eastern Greene County, actually in Nemacolin, Greene County. Now it's funny because the description she gives of this thing seems like it could very well be a mix of something, which is interesting itself because there was a sighting about 20 miles east of him years ago in Greene County that the gentleman I talked to called it a dark walker, and I've posted that up there as well on the blog. In fact, when Rosemary Ellen Guiley wrote the book about Greene County. She put it in there for her book as well, and James knew about it. And this that sighting, it was kind of like a Bigfoot, but it could have been something else as well. And but whatever it was, the guy's grandfather or father had shot it and killed it. He had put it in the back of his truck. But this was years and years ago when he was a kid. Now, James said that one night he was it was in 2002, just before winter, and had trouble sleeping. He said he's always had trouble sleeping, and he got up, I guess about 10:30 or so, and decided to go out into a snowstorm and go coyote hunting. Now, people who know Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, know there's a lot of coyotes out there, and people do a lot of fur trapping and such for coyotes and hunting. But anyway, he was out there, and he had actually trekked into the woods in an area not far from an old coal mine. Actually, I think he said they're converting the place into a shale mine, and so it's got caverns and stuff and caves around the area, which is something Butch, you and I have talked about for years about this upright canine Dogman phenomena. Is it seems like some of these sightings concentrate in areas where there's old coal mines, and they seem to this possibility if these things are indigenous or maybe not. I don't know. This case here, it seems like it may be a supernatural being. But anyway, he said he continued down the hill, got onto the other side. He said he set up, put his bait down. Said it was snowing. He said, but he had, he said it was so dark he could hardly even see his hands in front of him. He sat down the ground. He was actually backed up against some crushed shale, and he was just waiting. And he said about 45 minutes later to an hour, he said he was getting cold, so he said, I'm gonna pack up and head on back and go to bed. So he said he grabbed his red filtered and a 1 million candle power field spotlight, and he turned it on, and that's when he said he saw it. And he said that this creature was on all fours about 10 foot in front of him. Now, first of all, how in the hell did this thing just show up like that with not even noticing you? And he said the light coming on didn't startle it or phase the creature initially. It looked like it knew right where he was, and that he knew the light would be on in a second. He said it then took a step forward to him and lifted up on two legs. It didn't creak or crack when standing up. He said the only noise that he could note was a low, deep sounding pop in the ribs and the sternum area, like it stretched out and puffed its chest out. And he said it kind of grew in size basically when it did that, of course. And he said, I have to say it was at least 7 to 8 foot tall with 5-finger hands and 2-inch curved claws on it. He said the Dogman cryptid canine never opened its mouth. So he can't comment on the teeth, but he did say it took a step towards him. And he said he already had his shotgun leveled to take a pop at this thing. He fired a shot that hit it in the right mid upper portion of the ribs. He said, now mind you, that hitting something that close with a 12 gauge shotgun and number 2 shot, which is, that's a coyote load. When that thing comes out that close, it probably hasn't even come out of the wad yet. So he said it had to hit it dead on, and possibly leave a hole in this thing. He said, but when it hit it, the mist of blood tinged the red light as well. And he said it let out a loud yelp, tucked its ears back, and ran to my right. It made it out of the light circle in about 2 strides. I fired 2 more times behind it. He said, but it was too quick and I missed it. So I got up and started walking in the direction and ran, forgetting momentarily to reload the shotgun. The guy's braver than I am. And he said, I walked for 10 foot, found a large pool of blood, walked a few more feet and found less blood as I continued, but there were tracks in the snow. He said it was about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground. He said that process repeated until around 30 feet from where I initially started, and there was no blood, just footprints. He said it was almost as if this thing regenerized or something to heal itself of such a massive wound. You know, I stopped and realized then how stupid I was for even getting up and trying to track this thing.
Yeah.
He said, I didn't know if there had been any more of these creatures in the area at the time or if they hunted in packs. So he thought, you know, maybe he encountered a real werewolf or something. So he then trudged home in the night. Now, he said he only lived about 400 or 500 yards from where he was. So he took a very indirect route. It took him almost 20 or 30 minutes to get home because he didn't want this thing following him. So he made it back home, went to bed, didn't say anything to his father or anybody. So that's his story. And I tell you, I was kind of impressed about the way he described it over the phone. Now, I'm going to go ahead and post his second encounter at another time, but it's just as harrowing because what he ran into that time was something that looked more like what he said, like a Rottweiler, but this thing had the hands and actually came toward him and lunged at him. So I'll post that one later.
Was that his drawing at the bottom of the report?
Was that your drawing, Vincent?
Yeah, I think it was my drawing.
Yeah, that was Vince's drawing. I guess you were trying to what it looked like, you know.
Yeah,
from his description.
It kind of looks more like what we have around here.
Yeah, it does. It does look like the upright canines that people describe around here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now you and I have talked about this and mentioned a lot of times. There's a lot of different variations here in Pennsylvania, but mainly, you know, you've got the upright canines, which kind of look like the lichens from the Underworld series. You know, these things are huge. They got long snouts and they got strong upper bodies. People describe these things almost exactly to the T.
Yeah.
And they're huge. I mean, they get up to maybe 10 foot tall in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we've had hunters encounter them and they don't take a shot at it because it's just almost like they're hypnotized from this thing. Well, of course, you see that it's a shock value right there in itself is going to keep you from probably bringing a gun up and taking a pop at it. But who knows what? And if you got bird shot, you're not going to shoot a bird shot.
No, and the guys that encountered this thing they all had high-powered weapons. Even the one park ranger, you know, he was carrying a 40 Glock.
Right.
But you know, they all had that same feeling when they encountered it that, you know, don't pull the trigger because if you pull that trigger, things are going to go real bad real quick. And the size of this thing, I mean, I had one guy say one time, he said, well, why don't people just run away from it? I said, can you imagine the stride that this thing has? You'd never get away from that. You'd take 2 steps, it'd be standing in front of you waiting for you. And another thing that's really puzzling to me and always has is the fact that we've only had 1 or 2, maybe 3 reports over all this time where they were not inside of a state park, you know, within the state park itself. We had road crossings. We had one alongside the road, you know, eating a deer. I mean, we had 2 or 3 like that, but every other one, they were all seen in state parks. when you go back and look at the old reports, I mean, it's the same thing. They were either close to a state park, or they were in a big game land, or they were on a large farm, you know, not something that was going down to the local Turkey Hill for ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
So it was whatever's out there has been there for a long time. I mean, we can go back in reports that take us back into the 1800s. So, and the description is exactly every description is the same. We only had one or two where people said it had glowing red eyes. Every other report was glowing yellow eyes. I mean, everyone. And if people never seen a wolf, you want to take a good look at a wolf. We're fortunate enough up here in Lititz, Pennsylvania, we have a wolf rescue. And I went up there just to see how big they were. And, the guy's feeding this one watermelon because the wolf loves watermelon. And he jumps up on the fence to get his watermelon. I'm standing right in front of him. And I could probably show it on the screen here. My head, as opposed to what I was looking at, was like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he bit into that, and I mean, he was teeth clean back to his tail. And then this guy said, "Oh, he still has about a year to go yet to grow." And I'm going like, but there's one thing that I did notice when he stood up against the fence, there was a popping sound in his hips. So when people say,
right?
Yeah.
People say, well, it's probably a wolf. No, because they're not built that way. When they jump up to stand up, you can hear the hips pop.
Yeah.
Because of the way they're built. The canines, the ones that were seen crouching down or low in the weeds or something like that, when they stood up, there was no popping or anything. And besides that, the body mass itself, when you look at it physically, the chest is so massive, and the arms, and it's like the very first report we got. Remember, the guy said, "It looked like take Arnold Schwarzenegger and put him in a fur coat." Yeah, that's what he looked like. The size-wise, mass, muscle, huge hands, the snout, the ears. But we don't have one report, which has kind of always bugged me. We don't have one report where anybody's ever seen one with a tail.
Or it was obvious that there was a tail on it. Yeah, that's true. Very, very few. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. I don't know what that has to do with it or whatever. But
I mean, even the lady up there, we went up to visit, where she watched the one at the pond in the moonlight. And she watched that thing for 15 minutes, and she didn't see a tail. She didn't see anything. And she had a back shot and a side shot when it turned, the one that was staring into the pond. And her husband said, "Why was he staring into the pond?" He said, "Maybe he never saw himself before." I mean, it was a moonlit night, a calm pond of water. Probably looked like a mirror to him. But there have been so many different things in these cases over time. And I mean, we've had them run across roads. We've had them on farms. We've had where something picked up, a trash container and threw it. Now, that was kind of weird because the person that actually was staying at that residence on the farm when that happened looked out the window, and all she saw was a tall furry, which could have been anything. But I'm a firm believer in, because following the reports, one of the first things I do is to see if there's any caves close by and water.
Yeah.
And with the exception of two, almost every report there's a cave within 5 miles.
Right.
And water.
Well, I mean, a lot of the reports we have gotten over the years have been in central Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And, we call it the lichen loop that kind of extends from northwest up into Allegheny National Forest towards the southwest down into York County. So it covered a pretty good area, but it seems like a lot of the cases we're getting have been in that area. And of course, there have been certain counties where there have been more sightings. Clearfield, Center, Blair County, and as well as Cambria County seem to be the hot spots. But we've had people give reports, especially to Tim Renner in southern York County and along the Susquehanna. So we're, there's sightings all over the state, but those seem to be the areas where it's actually concentrated at. Now, there, like I said before, we get the descriptions that we get. Like I said, the first one, the uprights, are these huge things, and they're scary hell looking, large snouts. But the second ones are what I call the Dogman in particular, are quadrupeds that kind of have a sloping back like that of a hyena.
Right.
But they had the large head, the large dog head. A lot of people say they look like German shepherds, but they're huge. I mean, and they're muscled. They've got musculature. The legs look more human than canine, though the back legs may be hocked. It's weird. I mean, and now, he said, Wes said that this thing had the actual hands with the claws. So, I don't know what the hell what he saw, but, because, but if you go overall from what the sightings that we have received over years, it's pretty similar to what we've been getting.
Yeah. And a lot of the Dogman reports, like from eastern and midwestern Ohio, it's a different description. I mean, they're seen on all fours. They're multicolored. They got big floppy ears. They got tails. Some are long-haired. Some are short-haired. They may stand up on their hind legs, but they drop right down. They hang around old railroad tracks and garbage bins and stuff like that. So I'm thinking there's never been an attack of any type.
No.
But they're to me, it seems like you're describing to me a feral dog.
Yeah.
And people say, well, dogs don't get that big. Well, you need to really look at a Great Dane if you want to see a dog.
Yeah.
Dogs get big. But and German Shepherds, same thing. But it's the descriptions we have that go way back. They're the same. I mean, I really try to pick them apart. Well, does it have this? Does it have that? And they're all the same, with the exception, like I said, the two that said red eyes, and everybody else says yellow eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And we only had one report where it actually made a move on people, but that was the three couples that were taking a walk, and it stepped out of the woods and literally started screaming like a banshee, and it growled and made motion toward them and stopped, and then they booked. But
that was Roth Rock State Park in Center County.
Yep, that was the only time we ever had anything where it showed any type of aggression.
When you talk about the historical sightings in particular, just below the Pennsylvania line into Maryland, an area around Frederick County. I don't know what it is about Frederick County. Now, for those who don't know about Frederick County, it's the same area where Catoctin State Park and Camp David and Cunningham Falls and all that are at. But that county itself, going as far down into Middletown and then into Frederick City, historically, there have been sightings there. We've had, and people used to call them dueos. The old Pennsylvania Dutch farmers who moved in from the old world that set up shop down there used to talk about these things, and they would describe them almost like the werewolves they would see in Germany and Switzerland. But they were very similar to what people are seeing now. So so there are different types. This is something that we've been looking into for a long time. we'll get a case here and there, you know, but I think for the most part, people just don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you do background research, excuse me, these sightings go back centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. You know, the Romans, the Catholic Church with their stunts, which if anybody doesn't think that they were a little on the shady side, they were on the shady side. But and I'm Catholic, but it was where what they would do was they would hire a murderer, a killer, to go in and, you know, just pick somebody out of a crowd that's working out in the field and butcher them, just chop them up, butcher them, really make a mess of it. And then they put the story out that it was some kind of wolf, a man wolf or a werewolf or whatever they called it back then. But then the church would come in and they'd say, look, we'll take care of this if you people all join the church. Mm-hmm. So they would join the church, and then the Catholic Church would send in one of their army units to kill the guy that actually did the killing. So, and that went on for years. And then Spain got a hold of that idea and they did it. And so, you know, that a lot of these churches that were formed in those areas were, it was a farce. It was a put up, but it worked. I mean, you know, there was a killing. The church sent in their boys. They did the guy in, brought what was left of him back, and then burned him. And there you go.
Now,
church members, lots more money.
Folks in the chat room, if you got a question for us, post it in uppercase, and we'll see if we can answer for you. We did get a question earlier asking Butch if he had seen or talked about his orb encounters from Andrew.
The what encounters?
Orb.
Well, they're still around. I mean, the ones that like you were involved with us over in Lancaster County, that kind of has subsided. But the gentleman on the farm there, he's still hearing noises at the pond out front, and the light is still there across the road. The blue light, the changes, the red light, that's still there. There's nothing there. I've walked it. I've driven past it. I've walked up the hill, down the hill, around the hill, across the field. I mean, it's just like your son Matt said to me that night when he saw it. He went like, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah, you know, we sat out there on a February night looking for binoculars, freezing our asses off, trying to figure out what that thing was.
And it was just an orb.
Yeah.
And, you know, from where the driveway was where we were standing, and straight across the field, across that little bit of road, and across the next field, and then there's another road. That's where it should have been. There's nothing there, just bushes. There's no lights, no county pump lights or anything like that. And the original report that sent me there in another snowstorm in slippers like an idiot was orbs coming over the top of the mountain, which would have been on the side of the house where that new chicken coop was going up. And, you know, saw 3 of those. Had a couple sightings here in Reading, Pennsylvania. Had a couple sightings down in Pottstown, Montgomery County. But they are what they are. You know, they have no flight characteristics to speak of. So it's not something that's just, you know, going across the sky like that. It's definitely not satellites because they're moving way too fast. And, you know, when something stops and goes straight up, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not of this planet. We don't
are the size of the orbs about the same size or in color?
No, color's always a lot of times is different. We've seen white, we've seen orange, we've seen red turned orange. We've seen white turn to, I want to say blue, but it was more greenish than bluish. I was standing with a state trooper down at French Creek State Park, and I said, "You see this stuff much?" And he went like, "Yeah, like that one there." And I had my back to him, so he was looking the other way, and I turned around, and we watched a white orb, you know, zigzagging across the open sky, because it's the second darkest spot in Pennsylvania. Matter of fact, in the country. So there's no light pollution. So we watched it, and it stopped, and it dropped and made like a U, and came back up again and went a little further, and then changed color and shot straight up into the sky.
Mm.
So there, I mean, this state, if somebody says they've never seen one, they need to look up, because they're there. I mean, if you can differentiate between the satellites, which are slow movers, I mean, and they're always in line. So if you see one, if you look a little further, you see another. And with these things, I mean, they're usually on their own. They're either fast moving and they'll shoot across the sky, and they're not a meteor, they're not a bolide, so there's no tail or a bright light or anything like that. It's just usually a white dot, and they just go like crazy. I mean, they're gone. So, you know, well, I guess in the one picture from that disclosure thing they put out, the one where the combat camera is following the one above the ocean, how fast that was going along, and, you know, doing this number, that's pretty much you'll see in the sky. And the ISS, it's very obvious what that is. I mean,
Sure.
If anybody's got a half decent pair of binoculars, they can see the ISS. Pretty much see everything on the moon too.
Got another strange question here. I don't know if any of us can answer it. Why were bridges built with covered roofs over river crossings in the 1800s, 19th century? You know anything about that, Butch?
Well, in Lancaster County, it was because of the poor wood they had. They had to cover it, or the bridges were rotten out. So, and a lot of times, especially in the Mennonite and Amish communities, those covered bridges were always like, you know, between a number of farms.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if they were caught in the rain or something like that, they could go there. Or they had picnics on those things, because there was no traffic. They weren't built for trucks and cars. They were built for buggies. And we have a couple in Lancaster County that are, I guess they're pretty famous, but when I talked to somebody about that a long time ago, they said, well, the reason they put covers on them, because, you know, the roofs and everything, was because they didn't have drainage over these waters.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there were no such thing as gutters back then. So to protect the wood, which they say was not ever the best, because we don't have a lot of, well, up north we do, you know, in the forests of Pennsylvania, but, you know, not around Lancaster County. I mean, it's all farmland. So, you know, if you find an oak tree, you're lucky.
Yeah, you're going to find a lot of covered bridges in this part of the state, south central Pennsylvania,
and Ohio. Ohio
yeah,
has a lot.
Yeah, even in Wisconsin and such, and Indiana. Yeah, there are a lot of them. But and it seems like every one of them around here is haunted too. So that's interesting.
Well, you know, I've yet to. I've like I said, I've only ever gone on a couple paranormal adventures with a group that's been doing it for a long time, only because I was nosy. I wanted to see how they did it, what their equipment use was, how they set things up. And it worked out. I mean, I got what I had to see, and I went like, okay, I believe, I'm out of here. You know, it just, you know, and especially when something happens and it's recorded and you're the one it happens to, and they play it back. And after I tell them what happened, and they search their little thingy there, and they play it back, and I'm going like, that's it, I'm out of here. I'm going to get a hot dog. You know, it's crazy. I mean, but one thing that always bothered me, and I mentioned it to those guys, and now they do it now, but they've had cases where they've investigated homes, abandoned homes, where there have been lights, you know, on the first floor, second floor, third floor. And I said to them one time, I said, do you guys ever like have somebody outside looking up at the sky? I mean, something else involved here? Because in my opinion, everything is, this is all connected somehow. We're just not smart enough to put it all together. So the paranormal, cryptozoology, UFOs, there's got to be a connection. We just don't know what it is. And hopefully in time, you know, we'll put it together. But they do it now. They have a guy outside that watches above wherever they're at. There's a guy outside looking up.
It's a good idea.
Now, Butch, we had somebody ask about UFO encounters, seeing UFOs. Of course, you used to live on Tucson.
Yeah.
So you had some sightings out there. Tell us about your best sighting.
Oh, the best sighting was the first one, I guess. We were living in Tucson, Arizona at the time. We had just moved. And we had some young fellows come over from the University of Arizona. They were licensed saguaro cactus gatherers. Because if you take saguaro cactus out of the national forest, you have to have a permit, and it's got to be guys that have the right equipment to get it out and put it in and all that stuff. So they did that. It was a very hot day. It was about 7 o'clock at night, 7:30, somewhere around there. And it was hot, really hot. So my wife went in to get iced tea for everybody, and my neighbor next door, who was or is a doctor, and the guy across the street who ran the federal prisons for the western part of the United States, they were all out, and everybody like taking a drink of my tea, and I'm like looking at everybody else, and I'm like, what is everybody looking at? And, everybody's doing this, and the tea is here, and I'm like, so I looked up, and right above a mountain there was a very large burnt bronze colored craft with a couple green lights on the side, very faded. It had to be 3 football fields in length. It was huge. And it pretty much covered that whole mountain area. And there was no electric things going funny or lost time or anything like that. But everybody, neighbors, myself, the guys, my wife, everybody just like, looking up at it like that. And it just slowly rose up. It made no noise. That's the part that bugged me the most. It made no noise whatsoever. Just raised up a little bit, took a little dip, came back up again, and shot west like a bullet. I mean, it was just a blur. So, I'm like, okay, so, what's in the tea? And I started asking everybody. Everybody had the same story. So I called Tucson Police Department. I called the Pima County Sheriff's Department. I called Davis Mountain Air Force Base, every media outlet I could find. I just called everybody. Nobody had any reports on that thing. Now, A Mountain, if this is Tucson, A Mountain is where the top of my head is. And that's how you would look at it. I mean, if you were looking at A Mountain from Tucson, you'd have to go like this. It's tall, it's long, it's wide. And the reason they call it A Mountain, because there's an A on there that the kids from the Arizona University paint every year. The freshmen go up and paint it. That's it. But so, I started to accumulate a lot of paper, trying to find out what it was, this and the other thing. I just got tired of it. I really did. And I just stopped, and that was the end of it. Then I was watching a TV show one night about UFOs, and the bug bit me. And I've been at this now 33 years, 34 years. So.
Yeah. Marla Snyder wants to know about sightings in Center County. Have you gotten any?
Oh, yeah. Any Center County, Clearfield County, there's reports of almost everything up there, from paranormal to UFOs, out in Erie UFOs, up along the New York border UFOs, Center County and Clearfield. Not too many orb sightings, but triangles. Triangles seem to be a big thing up there.
I would say any county that encompasses the Susquehanna River tributary or the valley has had sightings. I mean, we got a lot of sightings up and along the river. So yeah, and that covers a lot of area in Pennsylvania. Also, have you had any pyramid-shaped craft or that's from Blue Crossroads? And Jenny King asked if you've ever initiated SETI contact.
No, never initiated any of that. No SETI contact. Pyramid-shaped craft, they've really only come about in the last couple of years. If you would have said something about those a couple of years back, probably nobody would have ever saw one. But they've been photographed now. The big thing now is still the orbs and the triangles.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike the triangles that you use or the military uses for surveillance, which are very small, and they have a motor, and you can hear those. But when you see something that, is just so huge, like there have been in the township I live in, I investigated both of these reports a number of years ago, and they were multi-witness right outside of a big department store up the road from here. They watched a huge, and they got a photograph, but again, camera phones, though, kind of shaky. But the thing that bothered me the most was that there was a protrusion coming out the point, the nose of the craft, and it almost looked like a spear. There was something on the end, but it was too far away, and it rose up, went over the mountain, over the Neversink Mountain, which would have passed over Mount Penn and Redding. And then there was a report, I think 2 days later, where it was seen out in Sinking Spring, which is in that same general direction of north. And a couple of years later, same thing, same area. Matter of fact, flew over the same place. And we don't have any military bases around here. And nor does the military have anything that big. I mean, their stuff is, not even the size of a Cessna. So, I mean, they're only used for observation. They're not used for attacking anything. But there's a lot of action in Pennsylvania. There always has been.
Yeah.
What I have seen, and I really don't know if Vincent has run into this yet. There seems to be a real die down of investigators. What I mean by that is not a lot of people that want to be involved in it anymore. Either they're frightened or they just don't want to know.
Yeah. And
a lot of these people were, they were looking for the government to give them the big disclosure thing. Yeah, keep waiting. But, I have a couple people that, want to join, but, I always look to people that are like-minded. That want to do the job, want to go out. It's not anything exciting or fabulous or anything like that. A lot of times you're either sitting out of the rain in the truck or the cold or in a tent or, by a fire or walking around the woods or abandoned houses or caves. But there are a lot of women getting involved in it. I'll say that. A lot of women getting involved.
Have Scarborough's Sasquatch is asking, have you heard of cars being driven, being lifted off the ground by UFOs? Have we had anything like that around here, Butch?
Not around here, but in Missouri they did.
Yeah, no, in Missouri. Where at? Around Kansas City?
I think Columbia.
Oh, Columbia. Okay.
Lifted in the air and turned around, taken off the road, set in the field, and it was being followed by a tractor trailer. He witnessed the whole thing.
What percentage of these UFOs do you think is run by, us compared to extraterrestrial or other?
We don't have anything like that. We really don't. I mean, if they're even the government say, they're clocking these things at 4, 5, 6, 10,000 miles an hour.
Sure.
And they stop. Well, if you got a human inside there, he's a speck on the wall. I mean, there's no way. And we just don't have that kind of capability. I mean, at certain Mach speeds, pilots pass out, even in their suits and everything. But I'm often asked if I believe, there's something up there. It's not ours. It don't belong here. Never was. It goes way back in time, just like some of these cryptids go way back in time. I mean, people act like a Bigfoot report is something new. Well, you can go back 200, 300, 400 years in the indigenous tribes, and they're showing you exactly what they're looking at, which is exactly what we're looking at. Same mannerisms, different name maybe, but the whole thing is that there are so many unanswered questions, and just trying to get the answers is like real work.
Yeah.
It really is.
Jamie King asked, Butch, how often do you receive abduction reports or cases?
About 2 a year, 3 a year, maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah. The people that did report them really early on, like maybe 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, the people on the internet just ate them alive. You know, they just made monkeys out of them.
Sure.
And but the abduction cases that had gotten involved with, they were just flat out scary.
Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't just the person that was making that report at the time. You had the whole family was involved. Many generations back that this started. So, and it's been, I guess, a lot of the people that only do investigations and abduction always said the same thing, where you have family members, maybe 3 or 4 generations back that were contacted, and then it all moves forward, and it just like picks up each generation, and the sequences and what they saw and everything is identical. I mean, it's no different.
Yeah, I have been. Well, of course, we've looked at a few well-known cases, particularly the Todd Seas case, which you and I believe was actually an abduction case, regardless of what MUFON and everybody else says.
Yeah. Right.
I can probably count on my one hand how many abduction cases I've been involved with over the past 40 years. It's not many. I mean, of course, people will contact you about their abduction, but it doesn't go much beyond that. They're missing time and they see a little of this, a little of that. As far as
a lot of times, an abduction case will come out of a sighting.
Right.
They'll be reporting a sighting, and then they'll say, missing time, or unusual marks, or scoop marks, or black and blue marks, right, or they woke up in their pajamas run backwards or something like that. That's a pretty good indication that something happened. I mean, nobody really gets up at 3 a.m. to turn their pajamas around backwards.
Well, yeah, true. And, but, most abduction cases usually come to light many years after the actual abduction. I mean, somebody it'll suddenly blink up in their head that, maybe it was an abduction 20 years ago when I saw that craft or saw those unknown beings and such. And, that does happen a lot. I mean, I have had people contact me years and years after a sighting or some type of encounter with, in their bedroom or whatever. And they don't really recall anything until years later. And then maybe something will spark it and they'll suddenly be able to recall it. That happens a lot. So, let's see. Any truth to blood type being a factor in the abduction cases? You know what? I have talked about that with a lot of people who supposedly know a lot about abductions. Nick Redfern wrote a book about that years ago. I have looked into it personally because I have been abducted, or I don't even want to call it abducted. I've been taken to another location, if you want to call that abducted or whatever. I've got B negative, O negative blood. O negative blood seems to be the actual blood type that most of these people that have these encounters, experiences have. Now, I don't know if there's any real basis to that. It's an interesting quotient to the abduction theory, but I don't, there's no real evidence as to that being true. Now, of course, I have noticed that a lot of the generational abductions where it involves like grandparents, kids, children, up and down the line, seem to have the O negative blood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take that perspective into the actual abductions, then maybe there is something to it. I have had people try to tell me over the years that O negative blood is kind of a, I don't know. It's just not that many people. I'd say it was like 12 to 15% of the population have O negative blood, but it's
if I could comment on that real quick too. Native Americans specifically are almost exclusively O negative blood type.
Okay. Well, I never, I know a lot of these came from a lot of these generations started from Scandinavia in the old world. So I don't know how much of a fact there is there. I don't know. It just seems awful bizarre that maybe there is something to it. I haven't seen the evidence to really prove it. I mean, what do you think, Butch?
Well, I'm going to agree with our good friend and colleague, Brian Bowden, who's on. I think the blood type really needs to be studied further. It's just like there's a researcher in Puerto Rico, a research scientist, who is studying cattle mutilations, and one of the fluids that nobody really ever looked at or looked for or anything like that was the serotonin in the brain. And he's been looking at a lot of stuff there. And, he's trying to come up with a conclusion as to why these cattle are mutilated.
Mm-hmm.
But that's nothing. Cattle mutilations are on the uptick.
Yeah, they are.
It's there are so many things going on today that if I had 10 more researchers, working right out of my house, I'd still be behind.
Yeah. The cattle mutilation phenomena, I've seen all kinds of instances where there could be an explanation for it, but there are others where it's just so bizarre that you really don't know why it's going. I think there is something to the fact that there is a type, either a hormone or the blood itself of a bovine is something that they possibly use for some type of scientific work or experimental work.
Yeah, that's the track he's on. He thinks that that's needed for something that they need, and but nobody ever looked at that stuff. Even in human mutilations and cattle mutilations and the sheep mutilations over in England, where they had the triangle cut behind the ear and the brain was removed. Now, we never had that happen in human or cattle mutilations here in this country, but over there, that was a phenomenon that continues on to the day where they're still finding these sheep. They're pretty much butchered like they were.
Yeah.
But now there's right in the front of the right ear is a triangle cut, and it's smooth and just like laser cut, and the brain is gone, and the stem and the brain stem also. So there has to be something that they need, that they're getting, whichever way they're getting it. But the mutilations, missing people, all that stuff is still going on. And it's like I said, I could have 10 more people, working right out of my house here, and I still wouldn't have enough.
Yep. Well, guys, I want to thank you both for coming on with me tonight. This hour went by very quickly as usual. So we'll have to get you all back and continue with this conversation. So thanks again. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Now, if you've had an unexplained encounter or sighting, please feel free to contact me through the Fams of Monsters blog site. Now, I want to again thank Butch Witkowski and Vincent Richardson for joining me this evening. And thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. Now, if you made a super chat donation, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this all possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. Next week, I haven't even looked who I have next week, but I think I've got Tanya Derenberger on. And she's got a very interesting story. Her father was Woodrow Derenberger, and if you're familiar with the Injured Cold story, then you know who Woodrow Derenberger is. Well, she's kind of followed up with the story and has written a book, and her appearance ought to be pretty interesting. So we're going to go do a deep dive into the rabbit hole next week. So until next week, stay healthy and have a safe, enjoyable weekend. Good night.